Okay, so hi everybody. We have some new friends with us tonight. So let's start by going around and just introducing ourselves and saying where we're from. So I'm Linda Hutchinson and I live in Loveland and I'm part of the Larimer County League and the task force. Jory.
I'm Jory Kramer. I live in Fort Collins, part of the Larimer League and the task force. And Don and I have chatted via email about some various things. So nice to see you in person, kind of.
Likewise. And on that note, I guess I'll introduce myself. I'm Don Colosino. I'm a documentary filmmaker in Erie, Colorado.
Dixie. Dixie.
I'm Dixie Schmatz. I live in Loveland also and part of the Larimer County League and part of this task force.
Kathy Wilson.
Hi, I'm Kathy Wilson. I'm on the state board and the co-director for Action and Advocacy for the state. And I live in Loveland, part of Larimer County. And I'm on the Legislative Action Committee. I follow education bills.
And LKN Wickens.
Yes, I'm Melinda too. I'm new to Larimer County League of Women Voters, and this group looked interesting to me, so I thought I'd sit in and see what you all are all about.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Diana.
I'm Diana Greer, and I live in Loveland. Newspaper reporter and doing a lot of other things. And I grew up west of Durango down in that. And I was really glad to see every once in a while when I go down there, I picked up it's the Four Corners Free Press that only comes out once a month. It's interesting, but they can have some pretty good things like the graffiti problem in Cortez. They also have a fentanyl problem in Cortez. And they carried a nice 2-page spread about Justin, the Fort Lewis professor, about his what's fake news and such. And I thought that was Binkley, I think is her name. And oh, there it is. They've got a nice spread about him. It's like 50 cents at the Absolute Bakery in Memphis, but I was glad to see that. And it was done well, I thought. And I'm on this task force, I guess.
Yes, you are. Kay.
I'm Kay Shaw, and I'm part of the Cheeseman group, Cheeseman Tower group in Denver. And I just was so interested in what, every time I would see something by a Larimer group, I always wanted to do it. So I thought, I'm just going to join the task force. So I did. Thank you all for letting me be part of it.
Excellent.
Yeah, I'm glad you joined. Kathy Marr.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kathy Marr. I'm in Loveland. I've been a league member for a little over a year now. This was the first thing I decided to join with the league. And I also work with Kathy Wilson on the education team for Legislative Action Committee. And I am your note taker this evening, though I'm glad to know that there's a backup recording.
Sonia.
I'm Sonia Ketting, and I live in South Fort Collins, but I've lived in a few places across Colorado, including a small town of Uray, and I've lived in Denver, and I've been with the league for, gosh, 18 years or so. And I am part of this task force, and I am a lead on the Colorado Citizen Observer pilot project we're working on.
And Jane.
Hi, Jane Hamburger. I'm, among other things, president of the Larimer County League and member of this task force. Joined with Sonia on the Observer Corps, Citizen Observer Corps project. And so happy to see this growing task force. It's nice.
Okay, and Karen, it looks like maybe you can't speak to us. So Karen is from Greeley and she's having input audio challenges at the moment, but she's interested in the topic. So welcome. Okay, so the first item on our agenda is Don, and he's going to tell us about his work on trusted sources.
Thank you, Linda. Yes, so Trusted Sources is a documentary film that I'm working on. It's going to be a feature-length documentary, and it's about the decline of trust in news and people that are working to restore it. Central question of the film is, can trust in news be restored? And so this project started in about 2019. I'd been noticing at the time some very loud voices, talking about loud voices, accusing media of being, or news of being, the enemy of the people. And that didn't sit well with me. And the one thing that I especially noticed that really bothered me is it didn't seem like at the time the press was pushing back on that very much. But I started, looking into this a little more, and I found a report by the Knight Commission on Trust, Media, and Democracy. It was called Crisis in Democracy. And it was about the decline of trust in institutions in general, but also, and it focused a lot on the decline of trust in news. And in that report, they use a lot of Gallup polling, and they update this. Gallup update this along with Knight every year now, I think. And but they made a number of key findings and some recommendations on how to address each of those findings. And I just wondered if anyone was acting on those, because it seemed like someone really needed to. And what I found after I started looking into it is there's all kinds of organizations and individuals trying to work on pieces of this problem. Let me start out, before I go into what some of those problems are, showing you just a little 2-minute trailer for the film. This is one that's on my website right now. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen, and then I will come back. And it should be right here. There we go. Nearly 70% of Americans say they have little to no trust in news. Trusted Sources is a solutions-focused film that shows the ethics of journalism and how news is produced.
There's no industry that's more integral to the functioning of a healthy democracy than the news business.
In today's attention-driven media landscape, it's not unreasonable to think that all news is influenced by money, politics, and ratings.
There's all sorts of media. It straddles the line between like news, opinion, entertainment.
There are standards that you have to adhere to if you want to be considered a professional journalist.
Public trust in the national media is just at a really all-time low. People don't know who to trust.
Many racial groups have not had trust in the media for a long time because their voices have been excluded.
At the local level, we think it's a much different story. They have a totally different relationship to their readers and their stakeholders.
The dwindling business, it's a broken system. It was based on advertising revenues, and they've all but gone away.
When a newspaper closes, when journalists lose their jobs, who's left to serve that watchdog role that the founding fathers envisioned in the First Amendment? The answer often is nobody.
People ask, what's the worst that can happen if people don't know what to trust and people believe things that aren't true? If you look at the election of November 2020 and the disinformation that was put out there, it resulted in people trying to use violence to change the outcome of our democratic election.
That's worrying for me, just as someone who cares about democracy.
If you don't trust your newscast or the stories that you read in the paper, we have no future.
So that's pretty dramatic, but then again, it's a film and I'm trying to tease people into watching it, so it's supposed to be. But the film isn't all about problems. There are plenty of documentaries about problems. I want this to be a solutions-focused film. So the way I intend to approach this is to, start out pointing out some of these issues, the reasons for mistrust. And then, I may kind of go into Act 2, kick it off into Act 2 with something dire like January 6th, or, people acting on fake cures for COVID-19 or something like that. But once we get to Act 2, then we start to kind of peel the onion and talk about each of the problems and examples of what people are doing to solve those problems. So the kinds of problems we'll address is perceptions of bias. Lots of people, believe that conservatives in particular, according to Gallup statistics, tend to believe that the news is biased against conservative ideas. Democrats, I suppose, and liberals have those feelings as well. There's also perceptions of inaccuracy. People actually think that journalists routinely make things up in order to push an agenda. Confusion between news and opinion. Editorial decisions that are based on ratings or, how they measure attention. Racial bias. And racial bias has been a problem in our news pretty much since the founding of our country, really, just because journalists were, only taken from the ranks of, white men, basically. And of course, that meant that the stories of, Blacks and Hispanics and people of other nationalities, other immigrants, we're all immigrants, but people in communities of color and underserved communities, but those stories were not told. And to a certain extent, that problem still exists today, and things are being done, but more needs to be done. Social media algorithms, as Justin McBrayer, I think, mentioned in his talk to the league, are big problems because they amplify the sensational. A lot of people today are getting their news from social media, and they may think, well, I have the world at my fingertips, so I'm getting a good cross section of news. But if they really believe that, they're fooling themselves, because the social media algorithms are designed with advertising metrics tied to capitalism in mind, right? The social media platforms only want to show you the things that are going to keep you on their platform, keep you clicking. And those tend to be the outrageous, sensational things. Media consolidation has been a problem in that it limits the number of viewpoints that we see. People talk about the golden age of television, or the golden age of news and television, when Walter Cronkite was on, the most trusted man in America. But if you really think about it, we were getting our national news from only 3 companies. And, it wasn't, it was less sensational, and there were less profit motives in how the news was edited. It was still limiting the viewpoints, again, to those white men. And then, we have declining reporting resources as local news is going away. So many, it's like 2 a week, I believe, are closing, is the latest statistic that I saw. 2 local news outlets a week. And that means that we're getting more of our news from, either national news sources or from sources from companies who are buying up the local news outlets and pushing non-local stories. So people are losing the most trusted source of news, and that's local news outlets. That leaves news deserts behind, and that increases polarization. So what I'm going to cover in this film are the solutions to each of those areas. We'll be talking, as you saw in the trailer, about journalistic ethics. We'll talk about getting diverse viewpoints into news stories, editorial transparency, and the film itself will be an example of that. Because, for example, today I was filming at Colorado Community Media. I've been following a long story that a couple of young reporters are working on. Those young reporters will kind of become characters in this documentary that hopefully will draw people in and get their interest. But we see the reporters as they're going out and trying to interview sources, some of whom mistrust them and believe that they're going to distort the story just because they're the media, right? But we show the discussions that take place in editorial meetings, showing how they're making decisions and how they're going to phrase things. Oh gosh, there's just so many things. I don't want to take up your entire meeting with this, But anyway, I'll be putting a lot of focus on local news, as I mentioned, and talking about something that, according to, gosh, something I just read in the last month or so, that most people are not aware that local news outlets are struggling financially to stay alive, right? And nobody wants to pay for news. They feel like they should get it for free. But who was it? Karen or someone was holding up, oh, maybe it was Diana, was holding up the local newspaper, right? You said you paid for that, even if it was 50 cents. Most people won't do that because they don't see a reason to. But yet, if it's a hard copy, somehow they see that as being worthwhile, right? So news outlets have kind of devalued their product by making them free online, or in the early days when they were trying to combat the loss of advertising revenue. And we're going to be showing in the film new business models. Some of them sparked by an organization called the National Trust for Local News that's trying to keep local news in local hands so that they have a real interest in the community. And anyway, trying to get people to understand that it's worth paying for local news, and they need to do it if they want to keep their news and not have a news desert. So that's all I'm going to say about the film, unless you have questions. But I think you can see that the things that I'm trying to accomplish with this documentary are very well aligned with your task force's objectives.
Yep, I think they are. So do you guys have any questions or comments for Dix?
I just wondered when you're expecting it to be done.
That's a good question. It's looking like spring of 2024.
And what ways could we help you to get your word out there about it? Either you speaking or you sending something or whatever to various groups. Tell us about that.
Yes. If you can spread the word to your members and your other leagues around the country, that would help. I'm trying to get a partnership going with the league at the national level, and I would, in exchange for a partnership and some publicity, getting the word out, you could show this for free, within the league to your mailing list or whatever, whoever your members are. And of course, I'm looking for funding. So if you know of funders who would be interested in supporting the completion of this film, I would be very welcoming of that.
Kathy Wilson.
I was in the last couple of weeks, I have heard on NPR and read in different sources about the increase in AI and all of the false, really to me, very scary information that's being put out there that is just plain lies or false or, made up in all sorts of ways. Are you touching on this at all?
I may. I'm looking for a social media algorithms expert to comment in the film about how those algorithms work. But a piece of this is also public policy and regulating how those algorithms are used. That it kind of goes hand in hand with artificial intelligence or AI, because it really is AI that is powering those algorithms. In the case of those algorithms, the AI is, observing the behavior of users to try to figure out what's going to keep them engaged. AI has been in the news recently through some of these chat bots. Chat GPT is an example. And I've tried some of this. I've actually spoke to someone, I think, who works for the Associated Press the other day, who's, experimenting with it as well. It can really be a time saver for, starting, we'll say, a document or a news report for that matter. But AI is going out and just grabbing anything on the web without any way of knowing how reliable the information is. So when you say things can be lies, yeah, they can be. And so there's still, today, there needs to be a human element in it. But yeah, I think it goes hand in hand with the algorithms.
You might want to just do a search on NPR, I want to say the end of last week, because the segment that they started with on Morning Edition started with a professor, and I can't remember which university he was at, but he has been studying this for a while. And so he might be a really good source for you.
Great. I'll check that out.
Mhm.
Sonia? You're muted, Sonia.
I was using my space bar, but that didn't work. I got to ask about the Donald Trump issue. So in the preview that you showed us, there was a couple parts that point to Trump. And do you have any idea that this would or would not put off people from the right to absorb the information in the project?
That's a really good question, and one that I'm struggling with. In fact, and this is my second trailer for the film, and I really struggled with what else could I put in there that would be emotional enough to get someone's attention without alienating. Sorry, my office staff is a bit loud today. Without alienating conservatives. So I'm really looking for examples. That was the best I could come up with. I'm looking for more. So if anyone has any ideas, you could collaborate with me on the film in that way.
We'll put our heads to it.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Diana.
Two things, maybe they work together, but do you ever remember going to a movie theater and they had the news part?
Oh,
And it was
no,
like propaganda for World War II or something like that.
that's
And
right.
they were definitely not unbiased. It was like buy war bonds or something. So we did kind of do better with our three broadcasting networks, getting to Walter Cronkite and those guys. But have you come up with a point in which the trust began to break down, the trust of the news?
It's actually been going in cycles. I mean,
Okay.
if you think about, the very earliest newspapers in our country were, started by, wealthy landowners to promote their own interests. As printing technology got cheaper, more voices could enter into the communication stream, right? Obviously, there would have been a lot of dissent in that time, a lot of mistrust, until we got used to all of those voices. And it's happened with each new wave of technology, right? When radio came in, and then television. Cable news was another time when we started to see lots of different voices, right? But also, we've gone through periods of reform. In the 1940s, there was a task force called the Hutchins Commission, and it was formed really in response to a period of yellow journalism from the late 1800s to early 1900s. Who was it? Upton Sinclair had written a book called The Brass Check about all of the corruption in the media industry. And then in the 60s, 1968, the Kerner Commission was formed actually to deal with racial unrest in the country, but put a focus on the news media for fomenting a lot of that through the white, narrative that was leaving the stories of underserved communities out of the news and really, helping to make more unrest in the country. So we've gone through this before. And I think there are things that public policy can help with, not necessarily regulating speech. And in fact, I think that would be a bad thing to do, but perhaps regulating whether a social media platform can put their thumb on the scale of the sensational and just saying, look, you can use algorithms to promote advertising, but you kind of have to separate that from what you're sharing as news.
I think we've made it too easy. Have everybody go back to setting type.
Yeah.
One letter at a time.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. If you talk to people who are promoting, they call it lateral reading or just news literacy in general, really scrutinizing the stories that you read to understand whether it's biased or not. Chuck Salter, who leads the News Literacy Project, talks about kind of slowing down your thinking a bit and just focusing a little more to be a little more discerning in what you're taking in.
one small example is Kay here. One small example that I heard in one speech when they were trying to talk about COVID, and they were trying to give an example that was not as currently as politically connected. And they talked about the idea of how we decided with speed limits and what kinds of things were for, whether you would go 60 miles an hour, so many people die, 70 miles an hour, 80 miles an hour. And when we began to look at there wasn't a correct answer, but where do we, if we were only going 40 miles an hour and no one was killed, would we ever get anywhere? By the opposite of if we went 80 miles an hour and a lot of people were killed. And so that was kind of like, it was, everybody could kind of understand that. That's just one I've heard.
Right. Yeah. Can you imagine if we were trying to reimpose the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit today?
Think of all the gas we'd save, though, if we did that. Don, I just wanted to point out that Karen is asking for the website for the trailer. So
Sure, I'll put it in the
that,
chat.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions, you guys? Okay, Don, thank you for your time. And
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, and you can come back to the meeting, the task force meetings anytime you want. Okay. Okay, so the next, is everybody ready to move on to the next item? Okay. So the next item is an update on now contributing to the Missing and Murdered Indigenous People Toolkit. So I'll try to show you the where this comes from. If I can share my screen. So can you see that resolution?
Yes.
Okay. So when we the last convention in June of last year, the League of Women Voters of Wyoming presented a resolution that was adopted, and you can see the text here. It's I'll just read it really quick. It's for action and awareness for missing and murdered Indigenous people from the League of Women Voters of Wyoming. And it's a public policy position on violence prevention. Whereas data collection has proven that Indigenous people have been disproportionately impacted by violence in the United States. Across the United States and Canada, families and communities have advocated for missing and murdered Indigenous people through numerous community events. Additionally, organizations such as the Sovereign Bodies Institute, the Coalition to Stop Violence Against Native Women, and Not Our Native Daughters have formed to advocate effectively with grassroots knowledge at the state and national level. Whereas Indigenous people experience violence, homicide, and sexual assault and are reported missing at disproportionate rates relative to any other race or ethnicity in Wyoming, i.e. 8 times higher than white people. Whereas the complexity of reporting and determination of jurisdiction for victims and families lead to confusion and errors. And the confusion can extend trauma for the victim or family who may have to report to several departments before proper jurisdiction is determined and an investigation can begin. And whereas, this is the part that I think pertains to us, within the news media coverage of murdered Indigenous women, there is a well-documented bias. So we resolved that the League of Women Voters recognize there is an immediate, urgent problem faced by our state and our nation relating to missing and murdered Indigenous people. The League of Women Voters of US recognizes the need for congressional attention to this urgent problem. And the League recognizes the leadership of agencies such as the US Department of Interior Missing and Murdered Unit. Okay, so that's the resolution. And let me stop sharing. So about a month ago, some of us attended a presentation by Fremont County in Wyoming. And they asked, what they're looking for is they want to create a toolkit that will help other leagues raise awareness of this problem in their communities. And they're looking to kind of collaborate with other Western leagues, state leagues. So I attended the meeting and I thought it was a good idea because I think there's such misinformation and disinformation related to the issue that maybe our task force could help in that small part of the toolkit. And Jory and Kathy Marr also attended. They had their initial meeting about a week ago. And so I'm going to continue working with them, and I think Kathy is. If do you see a place for now in this somewhere? I mean, just, it's a small part, but I think that we could help them with the misinformation and disinformation part. Dixie.
Are you thinking about using this stuff that we put on our website already for how to recognize and deal with misinformation and disinformation? Or are you thinking of doing something different?
Well, let me show you. I think it would be a good idea to look at a toolkit. So let me close that. And oh brother, how do I move this thing? Wait a minute. Oh, wait a minute. I'm not really good at this, but there you go. Okay, this is the ERA toolkit. And they state the problem. And then they have talking points. Why do we need an ERA? What happens to ERA? Support for ERA. And then traditional media, and then they have social media. It just seems to me like we could, if the problem to me seems to be that when it's in the news, in the newspaper, it is reported, it's victim blaming. It's what they said, there's a lot of victim blaming. And it seems to me that that could be corrected somehow. When the problem with misinformation and disinformation is that if you repeat it, it just is amplified. But you shouldn't repeat the misinformation, you should tell the truth. And that could be somehow we could work on that as part of the toolkit. And maybe, I don't know if we could use the tools that are on our news literacy page. I'm not sure about that. I don't think we've had enough meetings to really know yet. So Kathy Wilson.
I'm just wondering if, to me, I think a lot of the problem with this is that these missing or murdered individuals are not being reported on in the news, period. It's like there's a silence there. And I wonder how it's combined with news deserts, because if you have so many local papers who have closed, you wouldn't have a resource there to be reporting this as well.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's easier to sweep it under the rug than to be really looking into it more. The other thing that struck me, and this is kind of a bird walk a little bit, but media some of the shows on TV are using this recently. You know, I can't remember if it's Netflix, and there's one on regular TV, Alaska News, that's touching
Alaska
on this and
Daily,
really bringing
yeah.
it out. So I don't know, if you don't have somebody who's reporting, who is available to report, you've got a problem there to begin with.
Yeah.
Well, and then you,
When we went to the convention, there was a woman who said, I asked her because she was at our News Access caucus, and I asked her, and she said, well, it's either it isn't reported, or if it is reported, there's a lot of victim blaming. So I think it's a combination of that isn't, and then it's in, I mean, the first place that did this was Wyoming. So how many newspapers are there in Wyoming? You know, I don't know.
well, that was yeah, she was saying they're kind of in a news desert, the woman that was at our presentation. And there's also, I think it came out in our meeting the other day, there is a huge distrust of the media and white people in general amongst the indigenous people because of one thing and another. It's just a very complicated situation. But yeah, there aren't the newspapers. The ones that are there aren't vested in, their stakeholders are not the indigenous tribes. They are not you know, they probably don't even have indigenous reporters. And I've been loving that TV show. It's on ABC, Alaska Daily. But I just think, gosh, it's also kind of a pipe dream, I'm sure, because they've got a committed editor, they've got indigenous people on and people of color, they've got a very diverse staff and then editors that are committed, and a publisher who is committed to bringing the stories to the forefront. But last week's episode had a real impactful graphic where they took a map of Alaska and then populated it with women's faces of the indigenous women who'd been missing for over the last 15 years. And it made me cry. It was just unreal. But yeah, so I'm babbling, but that's.
Joy, I'd like to babble a little bit with you because I agree. I just wonder if there isn't some way that someone might want to try to connect with ABC, because at the end of every show, they do run something saying if there are da 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 da. And the two issues I keep going back and forth. One is you're talking about who the reporters are, and are we showing representation? If we aren't, that's a big part of the problem. But the other side is the law enforcement side of it. And I don't know how that anyone, but Hillary Swank is in that, and she kind of does go after causes. And so I'm just thinking if anyone could ever get any way, just even for her to maybe do a little blurb out that she does at the end of the show, to sometimes introduce and then bring out a few of the things that they've used, would they allow those to be used? And that becomes some of the tools for a toolkit. We might say, this is Alaska. This is what we know about Wyoming. You know, what is happening where you are or something. And it might be a contrast kind of, anyway. That's
I could add something. So I do watch Alaska Daily. I think I'm a little behind, but I also watched the Netflix special that they had on it. And something I picked up on that is there's a jurisdictional problem that some of these cases were suppressed because they didn't want the FBI coming in. They're like, you know, we've got this. It's our people. You get out. So it's not all the fault of the news not reporting. It's the fault of the cops trying to say problem, no problem. And so, you know, it's kind of coming from both sides. It's not just, you know, we've been looking for help and not getting any reporting. It's the cops saying there's nothing to see here because we don't want you in our space. So that's a little outside of the purview of journalism, but a big reason that this began is the turf war between the two.
Okay. Well, I think the Wyoming League has done a pretty detailed study, and they've studied the jurisdictional stuff, and they've done a pretty detailed study. I think I've read a few things about the problem in Colorado. Colorado does have a department now that's supposed to serve as a liaison, but I can't figure out what they're being a liaison to. I know it's with the indigenous people, but I can't figure out where this goes to. And then that opened in June. And I think it's the government's response to people complaining that they had nowhere to take these reports. And then there were further complaints at the end of the year, so they implemented an alert system now, but they still, in Colorado, it's still, I don't think people are, advocates are pushing for more. So I was just thinking, I think I'm going to go back to the meeting. There's going to be another meeting on, I think it's April 24th, right, Kathy, Jory? Is that what you guys have? And it's, so.
That last Monday in April, sorry.
Yeah.
Whatever that is, yeah.
So, and if anybody's interested in coming, and we'll see what we can contribute to help with the toolkit. Does that sound reasonable?
Well, you know something, the Secretary of the Interior is an Indian woman, and it seems to me like there might be some kind of reach there as well to find, because she's surely aware of that.
Right. Deb, is that Deb Haviland, or I can't remember.
Yes,
That's
it is.
Holland.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so it sounds to me like, Linda, that there is a little more than the misinformation angle, that we would have, you know, something related to work on, like that Kathy Wilson pointed out, and another couple of people. There's a few more dimensions to it: the news desert aspect, the misinformation, and the mistrust of the media. So there's a few components that are related to our task force, I think, that we could have input to. So it's not, I think, not strictly limited as misinformation, which is
Right. Yeah, I think you're right. Okay, is everybody okay with that? And I'll send out, if anybody else wants to attend the meeting, I'll be sure that Nell gets an announcement, that I update you on the meeting when it gets closer, remind you. How's that? Okay, any other comments on that? Okay. The next thing is I have to show you our page. We have a new page. And now I have to go do this again. Go away. Okay. Okay, so if you go to the League of Women Voters homepage, you can see that there. This is the League of Women Voters of Colorado. And if you go, I don't know why they put this under advocacy, but I'm not going to complain. If you go down all the way to the bottom and click Making Democracy Work, and we have a page called Making Democracy Work. And I kind of, I copied most of this from the National League's page on Making Democracy, or the LWVUS, their page on Making Democracy Work. I kind of shortened this, so, and I included that last year we adopted our resolution to add news access and literacy to Making Democracy Work. And then you scroll down and they've got all their pillars of Making Democracy Work. This is the one that they added this year at the election, or at the convention. And then down here is news access and literacy for civic participation. So we finally got our page with our, so we can actually point to it and say, we have a page. So I was happy about that. So my idea now is to go, okay, to go to our page and add, this is our news access and literacy page. And right here in here, I'm going to add something about that the resolution was adopted and we are now part of making democracy work. Okay. Does that sound like a good idea to everybody? Okay,
Yes. Mhm.
Kathy, you're muted.
I see that. But do it right under the boilerplate that all the task forces have,
Mhm.
right under that. So
Okay.
it's front and center.
Okay. Okay. And then I was thinking, okay, so remember when we went to the convention, if you weren't here when we went to the convention, we went to have our resolution adopted, which was not adopted, but it was to add now to making democracy work. And our campaign was called States At It. So I'm thinking that now that we have this page, we can continue with our campaign. And we could write like a one-page letter to all leagues saying, and we could put it on our website or on our webpage for now, but it could be just a concise little letter about, dear leagues, you really need to do this because blah, 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 what we said at the convention, I can't remember, but we have all the paperwork still. We could put something together, put it on our website, our webpage, and then I know that I'm thinking way ahead of time, but if you're in the league, you have to think way ahead of time because things sneak up on you. Then next year, when we get to program planning, we'll have all the work done and all we have to do is send everything out instead of saying, oh my gosh, we don't have anything done and we missed our chance again. I don't want to miss our chance again. So how does that sound?
Are you thinking we go to convention again? Because it won't be in Denver.
Well, I don't know. I don't know. I'm just thinking. It doesn't hurt to plan.
So
Yeah,
a
'cause
consensus position.
They said I'm sorry, Sonia, what did you say?
I'm just saying, so this leads to a consensus position, right?
Right, yeah, we have to have that consensus because that's what they said we lacked. It was just us saying this is a good idea and they want to see.
Yeah, but
We've been building that with Maine and Washington. I always get Washington and Oregon mixed up, but
Washington's when we had the other stuff from, yeah, Washington.
yeah.
But this wouldn't be, I don't think this would be a position. This would just be encouraging states to add news access and literacy to the Making Democracy Work campaign. Now, if Washington is working on that, on their local news position now, and if we concur, that would be another facet, I think. It would be just something different, but why not do all of it and see which one sticks and works?
So you're not proposing that we do a resolution again at National Convention?
Mm-mm.
Good. I second that.
Yeah.
Sonia
No,
thirds it.
yeah.
I think that, I maybe then this is putting the cart way before the horse too, but maybe just a table or something there, in their vendor area. They do let you have tables if you reserve them ahead of time.
Yeah.
Maybe that's someplace we could disseminate the information, but it's in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
too, so
Well,
that's
I'm just thinking that right now, we're not in Washington, we'll be here, and we can just put this on our webpage and then send it to all I don't know, we'll find an email with a list with all the league presidents and just send this letter and say, why don't you do this too? We did this, we added this to our Making Democracy Work, and have our argument why now should be part of Making Democracy Work with all those other little pillars.
Sonia.
Okay, something's wrong. Somebody, audio.
Yeah. I don't know. Something with
Sonia's
Sonia.
having a problem.
Sonia,
Sonia,
there's something wrong with your audio.
Yeah, Sonia, you're having a problem with your audio that's coming through to all of us.
Yeah, you're on mute now, but you were going ba 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 before or something like that. Yeah, that's doing it again. It's not working, Sonia. It's not working.
Sonia, why don't you write what you wanted to say in the chat?
On president's call. Okay, yeah, that's what I thought too. I don't know how to do that, but
Well, Karen, shouldn't Karen be able to help you with that? Isn't that what she's supposed to be doing, touching base with all of the chapters? And so it seems
Yeah.
like this would be the great way to use her, and because I think she's, is trying to look for places other than focusing on what's happening in Denver all the time and are the larger places. And I think this would be a great way to do it.
yeah, and I think she would help.
And I think
talked to her
she would
twice.
follow through.
Yeah, Beth or Karen.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, yeah, that's a good idea. So, but first we need to work on our literature that we want to circulate to everybody. And like I said, we have all the pieces because we already did that boatload of work for the resolution. So if we could just take that information and make it a little more concise, it was pretty wordy and had a lot of pieces, but we can make it a more concise argument that would fit in a one-page letter or something like that, like kind of like Maine did when they sent out their call for people to join them in their digital democracy work or whatever. So is there anybody who wants to tackle that one-page concise report? Okay. Well,
What's your timeline on it?
that's why I'm starting early. I don't really think we have a timeline, I don't, it's not like this is November or December and we have to have this done by January. So we've got a long time, and it's probably, we could put it on our web page anytime we want, but I'm thinking well, I guess we could circulate it, but people probably won't pay attention to it. I mean, it might be better to wait till, I don't know. I just don't think people pay a lot of attention when the summer comes up. So maybe the fall would be the time to start closer to the end of the year. Dixie?
Sonia posted before convention. I'm not sure what convention she meant, but
Yeah. Oh, before next year. Yeah. Okay. Before the national convention. Yeah.
Or national, not state, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I can help you, Linda, if that's the case. I couldn't do anything for, say, June, but if we're going to work on it over later on in the summer.
Yeah.
Is
That'd be
that all right?
I'd
I
be
mean,
happy to help you. Since I don't know anything about what you've written, I can probably help you cut it down. If I took some of that as a person who hadn't gotten into it and have a lot of biases, I'd be happy to do that with you, as long as it didn't, I'll be back in the 1st of May. So I could even come up if we wanted to spend some time. So.
Okay, well, how about we'll bring it up again at our next meeting and see where everybody is and who we should send the information to. Dixie, did you have something else?
well, Karen, people keep posting. I'm not sure everyone's seeing it. Karen had posted that maybe we do it as a sort of a group thing.
Yep. And yeah, and we could, okay. Yeah. That would work. Okay. Okay. So we have a lot of people who are willing to work on it now. So we'll talk about it next month. We'll bring it back as another and get everything firmed up, but that's okay. Okay. Does that sound okay? Everybody good with that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, and the other thing I had was the Washington State study. I said I attached that to one of the emails. I think what's going to happen if Washington is looking to adopt a position. They did a study on the loss of local news specifically to their area. And I think what they've told me is they're having consensus meetings now. And they look to adopt a local position in May at their May meeting. They'll vote on it. So I'm thinking that would we want to go through their study and see how their report and see how that applies to us if we, because I don't know what their final position is going to look like, but the one thing I noticed in that report that we never ever touched on was public health. They have a pretty big section on public health and we never touched on that. And so I think, I don't know, do you guys think it's worth reading beforehand or should we wait to see what they adopt as a position? Dixie?
I kind of think we should wait and see what they adopt. I looked through their, I didn't read it carefully, but I scanned through their whole report. It was very impressive, incredibly comprehensive, went down all sorts of different paths. And I thought it was very well done, but very specific to them. So they talked about their local news that was gone and which is important, you know, I mean, it was a local study. But I think honestly, depending on what it looks like, if we could do a consensus, I don't think it would be that hard to update a good part of what they did. But we can't, I mean, a concurrence, not a consensus, if we did a concurrence. But I think we really need to see what their statement looks like to see how detailed it is for them versus something that we could all kind of hang our hats on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense to me. So does everybody agree we just want to hold on and see what Washington comes up with for a position? If they can come up with a position?
So it just occurred to me, like Linda, who's new to the league, Wickens, is that your last name? Do you know the difference between a concurrence and a consensus?
No, I don't. Dixie,
Okay,
tell me, please.
So
I don't either. So.
So a concurrence is where we take, so a group puts together a consensus. They go through a big study, they ask lots of questions, and then they come up with a position based on a consensus of their league. Then other leagues can take that statement because they've done so much research and do a concurrence, which basically means they don't have to go back and do the whole study from the beginning necessarily. They can use that and the study work that group did as a basis for their own without necessarily putting in all that extra work. And normally a study, especially in the old days, would take 2 years. I mean, it could take, this one looks like it has taken a really long time. It's very comprehensive. So then you build on that with the concurrence to not have to do all that background work. Just
Yes, thank you.
If anybody want to add to that, that's a longtime league member, that's my take on what the difference is.
No, I think that's right. And I think the beauty of it is that you just get more and more people concurring and then you just have a stronger case.
Right.
So. Okay, so we're agreed that we will wait and see what they do, and that probably won't happen till May or so. Okay, and then the last thing, you guys have one more thing. Remember when we reviewed I can't remember the name of the bill or the bill number, but it was a federal piece of legislation, the Journalism Conservation and Preservation Act, and we drafted a document that stated our opinion. I filled out that federal action request form and sent it in. And I sent that in on Wednesday and I heard back on Friday. I was stunned how quickly they replied. Now, there were a few glitches in it. I don't think they read my whole form that I filled out because they kept coming back asking me questions. And very politely repeated what I said in the form. And so I've sent it back one more time, and I'm pretty hopeful that I'll find out sometime this week if I can post that. They seem to understand what we wanted to use it for. So, just because it is, the piece of legislation that we reviewed is dead. It never went very far. But because the piece of legislation also had a history behind it, that it kept coming back, we thought it was important to state our opinion of the bill right now, and then we can it'll just be a discussion point with all these other leagues who are interested in the same topic. Okay. Okay, now wait, I have one more thing. I think there are some announcements somebody named Jane or Sonia wants to make about a meeting on April 3rd.
Sonia's not gonna be able to. Or Sonia. Back to the chat.
Oh, Jane.
Maybe I should then. We've touched base with you all as we went along with our pilot project, expanding the Observer Corps to be observing government open meetings that would report out to the community and the citizens rather than reporting internally as our Observer Corps does. We did receive a sizable grant to do that, and hired a project manager who has helped us to put together quite an impressive presentation, I think, to roll out how we can do this, to recruit observers, to recruit diverse observers, and the technology involved in reporting out these observations. How to decide which of the 100 or so meetings that need observing or that they have an interest in observing. And just the partners that we have accumulated and are working with, media related, and the Colorado Freedom of Information Coalition, and so many engaging the public in their right to know of what's going on and decided. And I think there are a couple of really interesting caveats to this. One is the diverse recruiting of observers to observe meetings where decisions about them are frequently made with nobody there listening, and they don't know what's being decided about them. So we're giving them a chance to observe through league membership and the standing that the league has to stick with the nonpartisan and the factual basis of the news that is out there. And then the other piece of this is just the process of reporting out rather than keeping it internally according to positions. And the rollout's going to be, we are finally ready to do a ta-da, and get it started, is going to be April 3rd, 6 o'clock to 6:30 will be a social time. It's in person at the Old Town Library in Fort Collins, or you can register to do it virtually on the calendar, on our website calendar for April 3rd. It's, I guess, I don't know, Sonia, nod your head or something, but if we started out targeting people who had expressed an interest already in this, but we don't want to narrow it just to that, so that if you haven't gotten on board yet and you're interested in either helping us to promote this or in becoming an observer, or there are other jobs besides just observing, we need good editors to make sure that what these sometimes new to writing observers may need some editors to make sure that it is factual and that it is non-biased, non-partisan, sorry. So we need editors. We also need people familiar with technology and helping them to set up those kinds of uploading to some of the media outlets that we have. And I think we need people to get in contact with media. If you have connections with media outlets, in how do they know what's going on, and are they interested in some of the meetings that they can't cover themselves? With the decrease in money and funding to all of these media outlets, they've also had to cut staff. So, you know, this is a Larimer County pilot project that will go through June. And then we hope to take the data that we've gathered and the successes and adjustments that we've made into a statewide something similar project, whether it's done through the league or through other partnerships, that this will continue what we've learned at the pilot level to go across Colorado, and who knows, you know, beyond. So that's April 3rd, I think, was circling back to what we were going to talk about. If you can attend either virtually, register on the calendar so you get the Zoom link, or we'd love to see you in person for any or all of it.
So that's, and you said the first half hour is the social time. So, because I have a meeting at 5:30, I wouldn't be able to join you till 6:30, but that's basically when the real stuff will start. Okay. And Sonia says there's a big DEI component and they need help with that, reaching to build relationships for league in this.
Yeah, Cindy Linnefelter, who is our DEI connection and outreach coordinator, has contacted quite a few people around, but some of them aren't so obvious, and we need help in reaching them too.
Okay. Okay, anybody else have anything else to say before we leave? Or you want to stay here with me for another 15-20 minutes?
Okay, so Don put something else in this chat too. Did everybody see that?
Yeah.
The second to last chat. Maybe we need to save the chat and send that out to everybody.
Yeah, I just did. And when Sonia says, I don't think you should attend unless you really want to observe, we are training. Okay.
One other question I had about that, just because I know everybody's trying to do more with the DEI part of it. Is there any way for diversity that y'all can connect with any of the university? I'm thinking about some of the people that spoke with us at various times throughout the year who helped run little workshops and related to the other university professor. I'm trying to draw a name, just sitting here. Fast.
Martine.
Yes.
Martine
And
Carcassonne.
wondering if there is anybody within his group that he might have students who would be of different ages, and we could get different genders that way, and then maybe even have different ethnic groups. And that's, I was just wondering if there was anybody. I don't know whether he would consider giving credit or something for that.
Couple of things. Sonia recently spoke with a journalism class there at CSU, and that was a piece of what she talked about, recruiting they were journalism students, right, Sonia? Yeah, and some of them may attend. And then Martine Carcassonne, who does the deliberative journalism project, referred us to the family outreach. It's their what do you call it? It's FLTI, I think. Extension program, that's what it is. And so we've been in contact with the lady there, and they have about 20 students who go through each semester training in more community related outreach, civil engagement and things like that. So she's out there recruiting for us also.
Good. Sounds like you've thought of a lot. Well, that was just, I was trying to think that would be a faster way to get diversity than some of the others.
What we have not done, and if anybody has any Front Range community college connections, we would like to have some of their students also involved.
Okay, so let's see. Sonia said they're connected with CSU, but they'd like contact with other colleges. And Kathy Marr says, I've made a pitch a couple of times at our deliberative journalism project meetings, but that seemed to fall flat there. I think personal networking will be more effective. I think so too. And then Don posted the webpage for Standard for Family Leadership Training Institute.
Good.
Okay. All right, you guys ready to get out of here?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll save the chat maybe. And then you're free to go.
Thank you, Linda.
See you.
Thanks.
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody.
Thanks,
Bye.
Linda. Bye.
Oh, and thanks, Kathy Marr. She does all the note taking and she's
Hey,
wonderful.
Kathy.
Thank you, Kathy, so much.
In so many ways, yes.
Have a good evening.
Bye.